Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Hey guys, so I posted a few things today that got some traction, so I figured that means you guys were interested in them. I posted some things on manual safeties and grain weights. I talked about grain weights already for you guys, but some things came up in the chat that I want to try and quantify as best I can. Manual safeties or no manual safeties in my manual, that's not really a good term. It's the industry standard, but it's not really a great term because, you know, a manual safety is something that you like. I guess a Glock little protuberance from the trigger would be a manual safety. You'd have to manually push it down, but it's not an extra step. I'm talking about an intentional safety that you have to intentionally engage other than the firing process. Classically, the 1911 safety, and most other safeties like that. The vast majority of safeties on handguns are that. There are a few oddballs, like the Beretta 92 or some other weird thing, but most of the time, they're a push-down thumb safety, the vast majority of the time. So to have those on a handgun or to not have those. Some thoughts. I prefer a safety. That's me, and I said I prefer. It's not a commandment, right? It's not like you shall have a safety. But I like a safety for a few reasons. One of the most dangerous times in your gun handling is reholstering. It just is. Things get caught in holsters. Things get caught in between your trigger and your holster. You know, you forget to take your finger off the trigger. There's a myriad of things, and if you pull the trigger, you know, tens of thousands of times, likely one of those is going to go wrong. And that's one time when you're holstering, unholstering, where a gun is probably pointed at you or close enough to do damage. It's one of the reasons I don't like appendix carry. But one reason I like a safety, again, it's not a shall, but that's one reason I like it. Another is, and I posted a video of Masada Ayub talking about this. I don't remember if I got this from him or I've thought about it a long time and I developed it on my own, and then I heard him and agreed with him. But I think the safety favors the dedicated trainer. Meaning, you train with that gun, you know how that safety works. You think, oh, well, everybody knows how a 1911 safety works, but no, not everybody does. You know, the thug that's, you know, robbing people at a gas station may have never seen a 1911 before except on TV. He may have no idea how it works. So he may not know, right? He could, especially with a 1911, like you engage safety, the slide doesn't even work. So he might think it's not loaded when he pulls the trigger, tries to pull the slide back. That's not going to work. He gets frustrated. That gives you time. Right? He may just grab the gun and keep trying to pull the trigger, which may give you time. So I think it does favor the experienced shooter. And then the main reason that, and this is not always the case, but the main reason that I like a manual safety is it lets you have a much, much more delicious trigger pull than you're going to get with any other system safely. Glock triggers are garbage. A lot of other polymer striker-fired handguns, they're better than a Glock, but they're not good. They're not what I would call good. If you feel a good 1911 trigger, everything else is kind of, to use an old term that I've used, not in a while, but used a long time. After you feel a good, crisp 1911 trigger, everything else is like dragging a piano down a gravel road. It's just gritty and grindy and snappy and not clean. It's not. You interfacing with the trigger is one of the keys to shooting well and shooting successfully. Can you shoot a garbage trigger? Well, yeah, but it's a lot harder. Why roll that boulder uphill if you don't have to? Competition and speed trials show you that it doesn't slow you down because you're doing it while you're doing a bunch of other stuff. While I'm establishing my grip, before I'm ever even close to being on target, that safety's off, right? And I think a lot of people disregard it because they're like, oh, I tried it and I forgot. Well, yeah, if the only thing you've ever shot is a Glock or a polymer plastic Fantastic, and you've done that for years, and you pick up a gun with a safety and you try it for 15 minutes and you forget, yeah, you're probably going to think that that's a problem. But if you train on it and dedicate yourself to it, I don't think it's a problem. It's like somebody that's only ever driven an automatic and they get into a stick shift and they try it for 5 minutes and they say, oh, this stick shift is never going to work. It's an inferior system. You'll never do that under stress. You'll never be able to drive a manual transmission under stress. Meanwhile, some of the best drivers in the world drive manual transmissions. So you absolutely can do it under stress, right? But they don't want to dedicate the time to it, or they don't want to admit that their system is inferior. So they say, oh, you can't do it under stress. You're not going to remember the safety. To which I say, how does everybody who ever fired a rifle in the armed forces in the past 150 years, how do they do it? Because all the rifles have safeties, right? M16s have safeties. I don't remember anybody saying, well, don't ever carry your weapon on safe because you'll never remember to take your M16, M4 off safe in a stressful situation. Of course you will, because you've trained on it. It's not like it's any different with a handgun, unless you don't train. If you don't train, probably none of those are going to help you. But yeah, if you don't train on it, you probably are going to forget. But if you train on it, I think there's some real distinct advantages of them. One being a really good trigger. So kind of, do you want a really good trigger with a manual safety and be able to have a safe, operable handgun? Or do you want a mushy, lax, kind of undefined garbage trigger, or not nearly as good trigger? You can get some decent polymer striker fire triggers, but not nearly as good without a manual safety. Do you want to train on it and dedicate yourself to taking the safety off? Do you want to do that, or you just want to go with the least common denominator and get a polymer striker fire? There's no wrong answer. I'm probably in the minority in that I want a manual safety. I like it. I prefer it. I've obviously done a lot of training with both, but I think there's more advantage than disadvantage if you're actually going to train to a manual safety. That's my thoughts, my opinions on that. I've probably done an episode on that for a regular podcast. If I haven't, I probably should, because a lot of people out there that just only train Glocks, or their buddy's a cop, they're like, oh, manual safeties are dumb. Whatever. But some things on grain weight. Somebody pointed out in the chat using AI, which I'm not a fan of. I don't encourage you to use AI. It kind of seems like arming your enemy. Like every time you use it, you make it smarter. No thanks. But anyway, somebody posted on there on AI some pictures, and they're talking about the grain weights and velocities and energy. Well, usually the lighter, faster in most calibers is going to give you more energy, because force equals mass times velocity squared. So you get a lot more if you add on velocity than if you add on grain weight. It's just the nature of the beast. That doesn't mean, and it doesn't seem to be the case in the real world, that lighter 9mm bullets do better than heavier 9mm bullets. In fact, I would say it's kind of the opposite. If you look at a lot of the newer generation of hollow points that do really well in the F.B.I. testing protocol, they tend to be heavier bullets, 135 grain, 147 grain. Now, that's a broad generalization. There are some lighter grain weight bullets that do well, but in general, ones that are really consistent and do well are heavier bullets. So I would just say be careful of that. Not every you fall into the energy trap of just going by whatever has more energy on paper. These are the guys that think that a 300 Win Mag is better than a 30-06, or always better than a 30-06, or somehow is more lethal than a 30-06, or whatever. But I just be careful of that and ground it. Now, I'm not saying not to look at the numbers. The numbers are the numbers, and the numbers are valid. But it's not a 1-to-1 ratio that transfers to effectiveness. If that were the case, I would just, everybody would be carrying plus P all the time and shooting plus P all the time, and that's just not the case. So more energy is not always better, but it is something to consider. And I posted this interesting question in the chat. Not everybody here is in the chat, but if all the grain weights cost the same, because I was curious as to why 115 is the most popular. Is it just because it's cheap? and I posted in the chat, it's still a running poll, but if they all cost the same, if they all cost, let's say 20 cents a round, which is a good price right now for 9mm, they all cost 20 cents a round, 115, 124, and 147, which would you pick? And the 115 was not the majority. So it tells me it's the majority because of cost. The poll's not over yet. There could be more people that vote for the 115. But just something to consider there. And there's a time and a place for cost. If you're trying to build your skills and shooting high volume, or you're shooting up close and fast, and the point of impact shift's really not going to make much difference. You're working on your draw at 3 yards, for sure. It's another one on 115. So just some thoughts there. But again, terminal performance wise, it's just me. I tend to prefer 147, but that just is what it is. Also, it depends on your gun. Your gun may not like 147. Your gun may not like 115s. Your gun may only like 124s, in which case that's probably what you should be shooting. So just some thoughts on that. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.